Well, we're doing it again, but this time I'm going to take your guys' suggestions and see if you were right. We're going to be trying to beat our recent $800 gaming PC, but we're going to do it for even cheaper. Stay tuned. So several months ago, we built an $800 gaming PC that performed pretty well for its price. It was based on the Ryzen 5 7600, which is on the AM5 platform. However, I got tons of comments on that video saying that I should have gone with an AM4 CPU instead of the AM5. And you know what? For full disclosure here, one of the reasons I went with the AM5 is because I wanted an excuse to build an AM5 system. However, you guys all made some really good points. So today, we're not only following your suggestions, but we're gonna try to build an even better gaming PC for less money. But first, I gotta pay for this stuff. So check out today's sponsor, who consequently is a great source for a Windows license if you're building a new gaming PC. Is your copy of Windows 10 unactivated? Well, it doesn't have to be, because with today's sponsor, VIP SCD Key, you can get a valid Windows 10 license for under $20. Stop dealing with that stupid watermark on the desktop, the valid license for Windows 10. Also, with an activated copy of Windows 10, you can upgrade to Windows 11 for free. Just go to the link in the description below and pick up a valid Windows 10 license key. During checkout, use the code CYBERCPU for a 25% discount. Once you have your key, go to your activation settings in Windows 10 and click on the link that says Change Product Key. Enter the product key you just purchased and hit Activate. Now you don't have to deal with that stupid watermark that come with running an unactivated copy of Windows 10. Now, on with the video. So our $800 gaming PC a few months ago was actually a pretty competent system. I was really impressed with the results, and I'm still using the 7600 in my main system right here behind me. The Ryzen 5 7600 is an amazing processor. I would say it's probably the best bang for your buck in hardware on the market today. However, the Ryzen 5 5600 is no slouch either. Also, considering it's the previous generation hardware, it's also kind of on a dead platform on the AM4 socket, you can build a system based on it for pretty cheap. The purpose for the last build was to build a mid to high range gaming system on a budget that was upgradable. But for this system, we don't care about any of that. That's right, in this video, we're gonna build a mid to high range gaming system with no concern about upgradability for the absolute cheapest price possible. We're also going to put that system up against the benchmarks from our last system to see if we can beat it. So let's go over the hardware that we're going to be using in this system. So to start out with, for the CPU, we're obviously going with the Ryzen 5 5600. We're also going to use the stock CPU cooler so we can save some money on our total build. At this time of filming, this video is currently selling for $115.73. And the motherboard we're going to be using on this build right here is the Asus Prime B450M. This is a micro ATX B450 chipset board that sells for $89.99. Alternatively, you can use the ASRock B450M Pro 4, which is a great board that sells for about $100. However, we're trying to save some money, so we're gonna go with the Asus on this one. Now for the memory, I'm gonna go with G.Skill Ripjaw, a 16 megabyte kit. However, the only reason I'm going with this kit is because I already had it. I used to use G.Skill modules all the time in my new system builds. Unfortunately, it may have just been a bad batch or some quality control issues at G.Skill, but about a year ago, I had tons of these modules fail on me. And not just fail while I was building the system, they would fail weeks later, and in some cases months later when my customers were using their systems. This led to me having to warranty several kits because you don't want to change just one module. These are dual channel memory kits and they should be replaced in pairs. So the thing is I kind of pride myself in building systems that are so good that the customer doesn't need the warranty. So it's kind of embarrassing when a system goes down. It's even worse when the same problem happens to several systems that you built for the same customer. So because of that, I've recently switched to Corsair Vengeance LPX modules in all my new systems. These modules right here that we're using today are fine and well tested. But if you want to go with G.Skill, then they sell for about $32.99. However, if you want to go with the Corsair LPX, you can pick up a dual channel kit for $39.99. So the price really isn't that much more, and I would honestly recommend going with the Corsair. But for today, we're going to use the G.Skill. And for the SSD, we're going with a Silicon Power 1TB NVMe. This is a budget-friendly Gen 3 SSD that goes for $49.97. I've been using these SSDs right here for a long time, and out of hundreds that I've installed, I haven't had a single failure. Now, moving on to the case, we're going to be repurposing the same case that we used in the last build because, honestly, it's a great budget case. This is the Antec NX200M. This is a micro ATX case with a real tempered glass side panel that's hinged so you can open it up. It also has a power supply basement. You can also get an RGB version of this case, but it's roughly the same price. But to be honest with you, it's a trap. It's a trap! When I filmed the last video, I noticed that I could have bought an RGB version of this very case. And I said then that I should have gotten that one. After filming that video, I did. And it turns out that the RGB fans are not addressable at all. That's right, they're just rainbow puke all the time. You can't change them at all. However, you can actually turn the fans off if you don't want to see the RGB. And for roughly the same price, you get 3 fans instead of the 1. But for this build, we're going to go with the non-RGB model that sells for $52.96. And then finally, for the power supply, I got a lot of complaints with the power supply that I recommended in the last video. And it's the same power supply that I'm going to be using in this one, and that's the Thermaltake Smart 700 watt. Many people in the last video said that this was a fairly low-rated power supply. However, I use the 500-watt version of this supply in all of my new systems and as a replacement for failed power supplies, and I've installed hundreds of these things and I've never had an issue. But with that said, I'm installing these on basic office systems. They're not gaming systems, so there's definitely a different power requirement. We're going to be using this supply on this system because honestly, I already had it. If you don't want to go with this specific supply, then you should be able to get another supply for roughly the same price. This supply sells for $54.99, but I also found an EVGA 700 watt that sells for $69.99. So for $15 more, you can kind of have peace of mind. Now, I saved the video card for last because typically this is the most expensive part of any new build. This is also how we're going to save money on this build here. Now, as you can already tell, out of everything that we've so far bought for this system, it's brand new. However, the video card is not. This, just like my last video, we're gonna go with a secondhand video card from eBay. Now, I'm a major proponent of buying secondhand graphics cards. There's certain hardware that you just don't wanna buy secondhand, but video cards are not one of them. Typically, you can get a great deal buying GPUs from eBay, and it's not as risky as you might think. The first rule that I use when buying GPUs on eBay is to pay with PayPal. The reason why is because PayPal is really good at making things right if you get screwed. And that's like if someone sends you a card that doesn't work, PayPal will make it right. I've had instances where I've had purchased hardware from eBay that just didn't work out, and PayPal not only refunded me, but told me to keep the parts. The second rule with buying secondhand GPUs is always buy them from a high-rated seller that has lots of reviews. Typically, these sellers aren't going to risk their eBay rating by selling you junk. And finally, the third rule of buying GPUs on eBay is never buy a card that only has one blurry picture. Make sure that you buy cards from people who have uploaded several high-resolution pictures so you can take a good look at all the way around the card at what you're buying. And make sure to look at those pictures close for dirt or damage or things of that nature. By following those rules, I have yet to buy a bad GPU on eBay. And I bought a lot of GPUs on eBay. The savings you can get by doing it that way are really good. For instance, the video card that we're using in this build here is an EVGA 3070 XC3. You can still buy this card new today for around $600, but I bought this one on eBay for $298. That's over half the price as it would have cost new. And because of the money that we saved on the GPU, the grand total for this entire system comes to $694.63. Not only is that over $100 less than the AM5 system that we built a few months ago, but it's only around $100 more than what a new 3070 would have cost. But we got the whole system. Now, this is a great deal, but is this thing gonna perform like our last system did? For that, we're gonna have to build it. And I'm not gonna bore you with that. So I'm just gonna pause the camera and build the system. So now that we have it all together, let's move on to benchmarks and see how this system performs. So the first game we're looking at today is Black Mesa. This is an older game that I still keep in my benchmarks because, well, a lot of people like to play older games. This is a remake of Half-Life 1 based on the Half-Life 2 engine. On our $800 AM5 system, we got an average FPS of 294.7. We also got a 1% low of 207.3 and a 0.1% low of 179.5. Once switching over to our $700 AM4 system, we got an average FPS of 283.3. That's a 3.9% loss in average frame rate. Unfortunately, it doesn't get any better in this game because our 1% low was 150.1. That's a 32% loss, and our 0.1% low was a 98.9. That's a 57.9% loss. Now, this was the first benchmark I did, and you could probably tell I was a bit disappointed in the results, but the results were the results no matter what I thought. However, I think I can explain them. I noticed that both of these systems never went over 300 FPS. That seemed kind of suspicious, especially when our average was right on 300 FPS. So I did a little bit of research, and sure enough, 300 FPS is in fact the limit for the Half-Life 2 engine. So with that in mind, the result for this game is pretty meaningless because both systems laid up against the frame rate limit. However, the AM5, in all fairness, did it just a little bit better. The next game we're looking at is Counter-Strike 2. Since this game is only a few years old, it better not have the same problems as Black Mesa had. Our $800 AM5 system, we got an average frame rate of 233.7. We also got a 1% low of 109.4. Our 1% low came in at 60.7. Our $700 AM4 system, we got an average frame rate of 280.9. That's an 18.3% improvement over our AM5 system. However, that's where the good news kind of ends in this game because our 1% low was 90.4. That's a 19% loss from our AM5 system, and our 0.1% low came in at 50.7. That's an 18% loss. Now, I just have to specify that the gameplay on both systems felt fine. It didn't feel jerky, and you really couldn't perceive the frame dips at all because, you know, both systems had kind of a low 1% and 0.1% low, regardless of which one won. According to the numbers, there were obvious frame dips on both systems. Unfortunately, though, they were worse on the AM4 system than the AM5 system. And this might be due to the fact that the 7600 is a much better CPU than the 5600. However, the 3070 definitely came in clutch with a higher average frame rate on the AM4 system. So this is kind of a half win, I guess. The next game we're looking at is Cyberpunk. And unfortunately, I think the days of Cyberpunk being the new Will It Run Crisis are kind of over. But let's see how it did. Our $800 AM5 system, we got an average frame rate of 72.6. We also got a 1% low of 57.3. Finally, we got a 0.1% low of 49.7. Now, looking at our $700 AM4 system, we got an average frame rate of 128.8. That's a 55.8% improvement. On our 1% low, we got a 93.8. That's a 48.3% improvement. And finally, on our 0.1% low, we got a 70.1, which is a 34.1% improvement. Now, this is a clear across-the-board win for the AM4 system. And I'm gonna say that it's probably 100% thanks to the fact that we're running a 30 series RTX instead of a 20 series RTX like we did with our AM5 system. Clearly, Cyberpunk is much more optimized for a 30 series card. Our next game is Red Dead Redemption 2. On our $800 AM5 system, we got an average frame rate of 92.1. We also got a 1% low of 74.5. Our 0.1% low came in at 53.4. On our $700 AM4 system, we got an average frame rate of 108.2. That's a 16.1% improvement. Now, taking a look at our 1% low, we got an 81, giving it an 8.4% improvement. Finally, our 0.1% low came in at 46.9. This is unfortunately a drop from our AM5 system. Now, the AM4 system clearly won here. However, we did get a considerable drop in our 0.1% low, but in all reality, it dropped from 53.4 to 46.9 on 0.1% of generated frames. So that's not as bad as it sounds. It was completely unnoticeable during gameplay. The next game we're looking at is Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I remember when this game came out, I could barely get 30 FPS on it with all the settings as low as they go. Oh, how times have changed. Because on our $800 AM5 system, we got an average frame rate of 179.2. Our 1% low was 155, while our 0.1% low was 125.7. On our $700 AM4 system, we got an average frame rate of 212.5. That's a 17% improvement over the AM5 system. Our 1% low was 184.9, giving it an 18% improvement, and our 0.1% low was 175.5, giving it a 33.1% improvement. In fact, our 0.1% low was almost the average frame rate of our AM5 system. So this is a clear win for the AM4 system and the 3070. So I think we achieved what we set out to achieve. We built a mid to high range gaming system on an absolute shoestring budget and indeed beat the performance of our more expensive AM5 system. But there's some things to consider here. Yes, the AM4 system absolutely won in almost every benchmark. But we did have a few instances where the 5600 showed its age. But ultimately, aside from Cyberpunk and Red Dead Redemption 2, every game we tested was well within our monitor's refresh rate. That means if we turn on VSync, these systems would be almost indistinguishable from each other. And also, I can't skip over this point. The reason why the AM4 system won wasn't because of the processor. Obviously, the reason why it won was because of the 3070, a GPU we were able to afford because of the money we saved on the motherboard and CPU on the AM4 system. However, if we took the same 3070 and put it in our AM5 system, it would definitely win. So ultimately, this was more of a battle of GPUs than it was a battle of processors. In fact, the only factor the platform itself played in this competition was the fact that it was cheaper and we were able to afford the better GPU. Now, the downside here is that the AM4 system is a dead platform. The AM5 is going to be upgradable for the foreseeable future, but this is essentially it for the Ryzen 5 5600. If we even tried to upgrade the GPU on this 5600, then we're going to run into a CPU bottleneck. And unless you're willing to dump some money into the Ryzen 7 or a Ryzen 9 for the AM4 platform, then this system is what it is. So you're gonna have to keep that in mind whether you decide to go this route here or follow my other video where I build a gaming system with upgradability in mind. And if you missed that one, you can check it out here. Remember, you could always just take this 3070 and put it in that system. In fact, it's exactly where this one is going as soon as the water block I ordered comes in. As always, you guys have a great day.